Well, good day, everybody, and welcome back to the Camera Life podcast. It is Thursday, the 6th of August, and being a Thursday morning, we have a treat for you. We are getting to interview yet another amazing photographer. I'm Greg. Joining me is Justin, and obviously we're the hosts of the Camera Life, but we're also part of the Lucky Straps team. Actually, Justin owns Lucky Straps team, so I'm an indentured servitude, and I'm happy with my situation. Anyway, enough about me. We are joined today by a professional photographer with extensive history and an extensive range of photography styles. We are joined by John Norris. G'day, mate. How are you?
Hi.
Good to have you on board. Before we get into the nitty gritty of who you are, what you do, and where you've been, let's hear in your own words. What's your elevator pitch? How do you describe yourself and your work?
I guess I'm a person who chose to make photography my life, and I integrated my photography into my family life, my working life, my leisure life, and I'm very fortunate in that I managed to succeed in making a living from it, starting with skiing as the predominant thing, which then expanded to eventually to mountaineering, to social portraiture in the small alpine valley where I lived. And I've got a real passion for nature, so I shoot a lot of pictures of trees, forests, things like that, the landscape. Also involved with motorcycling, passionate motorcyclist and motorcycle traveller. And I've managed to incorporate that in my working life as well.
Yeah.
So I guess that's it in a nutshell.
Amazing. Now, of course, you're mates with our one of our alumni, Jason Lau, who's been on this podcast multiple times. And Jason is also a very mad keen. Not only does he ride amazing motorcycles, but he also loves photographing them. When did you and Justin sort of cross paths? Where did you meet? Sorry, Jason, not Justin. You only just met Justin now. Yeah. Silly question.
Yeah, well, I only met Jason once, but had a really great conversation with him, and it was at the Fuji Creator Summit this year. I had a great time there, and one of the nice things was meeting Jason and chatting to him, and I was quite flattered that he put my name forward for the podcast here.
Yeah, well, he's got a good eye. He can see talent when he knows it. So, I think it's great. And it's just sort of testament again to the importance of these sort of events for networking and meeting peers and like-minded folk. We've certainly found a lot of joy in those sorts of things, especially with BFOP and in the past.
What drew you to the Creator Summit? Why did you head along, John?
Well, it'd probably be music to your Fuji podcast, but I do
I love it.
I do rather like Fuji cameras. So I was interested in Fuji, but also I kind of was interested in making connections and seeing what was going on in Melbourne. I only moved to Australia a couple of years ago from Europe. So I'm still finding my way out here. And the Creator Summit seemed like a really good event. And unlike most things, the ticket price was very reasonable, I thought, for what they did. I also got to try out the GF 100 RF, which was a real treat to have a go with that.
You liked it?
I loved it, actually. It would really suit my lifestyle.
Yeah, me too.
But I think I'm going to have to wait until I update computers and so on. That's the thing that held me back, really, from jumping straight in, was that the stuff I've got in my office would have struggled a bit with it.
Yeah, I found that. I used to do a lot of reviews for a site, and I remember the first time I got sent a GFX, I think it was the 100S Mark II, or maybe the 100S. Anyway, and I had like a 2007 iMac, Was it yeah, it was pretty old. It couldn't handle those files.
Just destroyed it.
Just went, "Nah, I'm turning off. We're not having this conversation."
It'd be interesting to know what level of computer you need now, like from the new range of, say, Macs, like what level you need to work with those files at a sort of a reasonable pace. Because I just checked the price on what a top spec MacBook Pro is now, and I think it was 10 or 11 grand for a fully spec'd Mac, and that's for like I'm sure that's probably overkill for what you need, but I couldn't believe how much that was.
And as my sort of income from photography slows as I sort of approach retirement, I had to think about investing that kind of money, because it's not just the camera, it's everything else that it's something that you would I can see myself getting one. I love the way it handled. I loved the whole concept of the camera, but I bought a GFX 50S2 secondhand new day before I left, and I found that it's not as compact, so not as useful for the outdoorsy stuff, but for everything else, that's a wonderful camera. And possibly overlooked in the search for the 100 versions.
Yes. Yeah, it's an interesting, and they've had a couple of iterations of the GFX models. I mean, there was the 50R, which is the rangefinder style. It was like a grown-up X Pro body. But that, they kind of dropped that after the first iteration. But I'm glad they've stuck with the 50 megapixel sensor. I think, that could be a sweet spot for a lot of people without breaking the bank, without, needing a new computer necessarily, that sort of thing.
But they don't still make that though, do they? The 50?
No, the 50.
Yeah, so now it's 100.
It's the same, really, I think, but there's plenty secondhand. So
Well, if you believe the rumors sites, there's a 180 megapixel on the horizon for the GFX range. So the 100 will become the 50. That's going to be the little sensor. Isn't that crazy?
180. You'd need to lease computer time from NASA to edit those files, surely.
I just took a little X30 on a trip into the Bogong High Plains, and so it's kind of the other extreme there. I don't know what that is. I think it's 12 or 16.
And
compact.
This came out pretty okay. I just thought that a little return to the compact camera would be fun for a trip.
Well, there's a surge in them again. They're hugely popular. People are calling for them more and more. And surprisingly, at the moment, Kodak have some of the best options on the market. For those sort of entry-level point and shoot that are a little bit better than just the Temu versions of things. They sell a lot of compact digital cameras that are 12 or 16 megapixel. And so we do see we are seeing the bigger brands scurry at the moment, and there's rumors all over about Canon bringing out another compact, Sony doing another compact, even Nikon like repurposing old compacts that they used to make and bringing them forward for the next generation, because they took their eyes off that ball. For years they stopped investing in compacts, and now no one offers good ones.
I guess they just figured, probably rightly at the time, that the telephone had completely usurped compact, and in reality I'm not sure that it has, because I came back with pictures of that little X30 that you couldn't have got on a phone.
It's a different character, isn't it? And I think people are moving away from using their phone for photography because it's distracting. You're in the middle of taking shots and you start getting notifications. All of a sudden, you're not thinking about the shot or the composition or the light.
Well, the next minute you're on Facebook Marketplace. You've been like, hang on a minute, what was I doing again?
Yeah. Why is there a GFX in my card? It just happens to the best of us.
Exactly.
Very, very good. Let's before we proceed and maybe roll back the clock a little bit, get a bit more of your history. Justin, you want to say good morning to the handful of people that have shown up?
I do. Philip Johnson is here first as always. He says, morning all from a chilly 0 degree Blue Mountains. Chilly everywhere. Morning, Lucinda. Julie Powell says, welcome back, Justin. It's good to be back. For those that don't know, I'll talk about it all on Monday night show, but I've been in Africa on safari, trying not to get eaten by lions, and I'm back, and I'm tired, but I'm back. David Mascaro says, hello from the Bay Area, San Francisco. Robert Varner, good morning, Australia. He's saying good morning from, where is it, New Jersey, I think. Digifrog is here. Tassie. Lisa Leach says, good morning from the Mallee region on a Brentwood workshop to the Salt Lakes. Well, lucky you.
Nice.
I've seen some of those photos, and they're popping up on my socials, and they look insane. Felicity Johnson, good morning. Lucinda says it was $8,000 for her laptop a few years ago. So, oof, wowzers.
Well, even this one I got this in the start of 2025, I think. And this is a 14-inch MacBook M3. I upped the RAM, didn't add more storage because I have external drives, and that was $3,600.
Yeah. And I think I reckon that like something around that $3,000 to $4,000 range should handle a GFX file for non-high volume use, like for just general use, not for like shooting weddings with it or something crazy.
Yeah, doing batch stuff.
Yeah. So anyway, be interesting to know from a few like who's using GFX that's got the cheapest laptop currently, and how does it go? That's what I'd like to know. Is anyone handling those 100 megapixel files with like a something old and it's still handling it? Stuart Lyle, morning from Hobart Town. Wookie, morning.
G'day, Shane.
And East Coast Photography. Good morning, gents, from Forster, New South Wales.
Nice.
Very cool. And John's joining us from Healesville, chilly Healesville.
Yeah. What's the temp in Healesville this morning, John?
No idea. I really don't know. Probably 6 degrees or something.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's warm in Bendigo.
I'm throwing a complete guess out there.
That's okay. As long as you're warm and snug, that's fine for now.
Yeah. Warm enough to have the heater on.
Yeah.
Oh, should we do, before we get into it too, should we do an ad read? Should we talk about our sponsor of the show, Lucky Straps?
Indeed.
What? Hang on. Apparently the R in Forster is silent. Forster. I'm going to say it. I mean Foster.
Yeah.
Nah, it sounds wrong. Forster. Anyway, if you would like a beautiful leather camera strap that you can use anywhere around the world, including on safari in Africa, to carry your camera and keep it safe, go to luckystraps.com and check out our range of beautiful, handcrafted, Australian-made leather camera straps with quick-release clips, anti-theft locks, cut-resistant Dyneema webbing so they can stay safe while you travel around the world. Luckystraps.com. Use code Greg if you would like a discount. Or use code Justin if you prefer that. That is all. Okay, on with the show.
All right. Thanks for doing that, Jay. It's always nice to keep the lights on, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's always important. Try to. Yeah. All right, John. Let's roll back the clock a little bit. I find it fascinating to find out where that spark began for people and what motivated. Was it you had creative parents, or perhaps a creative teacher in the early years, or maybe you didn't pick up photography until a bit later? Tell us a little bit about where your journey began.
I guess in reality it began when I was in my mid-teens, and my father lent me it was called an arete, and it was one of these sort of silvery coloured cameras in a brown leather case, and with no built-in light meter. And he sent me off to France with this thing with a little card that he'd copied off the back of a film box, where gave you the settings for a cloudy day, the settings for a sunny day. Yeah. And so I went off and fiddled with apertures and shutter speeds of this thing, and amazingly came back with, it's quite interesting, with quite reasonably well exposed print photographs from it. Anyway, he reclaimed the camera, and I was given a plastic 110 cartridge Kodak.
Yeah, I had one of those. Yeah,
and it lived in the top box of my motorbike for a long time, and eventually got stolen outside a pub. the interesting thing was it probably only had a 25-shot film in it, but it was the last 6 months of the previous 6 months of my life was on that film.
Yeah.
Because at the time, I guess I was just taking a shot 1 week and then nothing for 2 or 3 weeks and then another shot. So I was pretty gutted about that. So then my dad, again, at one of my birthdays, he gave me, I actually got it to hand to show you this.
Nice. We love a prop.
Oh, and that's the original. That's the one you've kept that the whole time.
I've kept it. Yeah, it's actually still got the original address on the back. But yeah, this thing is an amazing camera, and I took it on various motorbike trips, and then years later, I went on a year's travel around the world, and I left my Pentax Semi Super at home and took that, and the discipline of working with that roughly 40mm lens, but with all the full manual controls and everything, I guess it really got me into things. My dad was a really keen amateur photographer. He used to do slideshows for local groups and clubs and things, and I got that bug from him too. And my grandfathers both took photographs too, so I've got some quite interesting old transparencies from their day.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
But I think where the professional side of it came in really was quite a few years later. I went out to France on the invitation of my brother, who was doing winters out there as a ski bum. And I'd been having trouble with my back at the time, and I'd just come out of a rehabilitation place. And he said, "Come out, John, have a holiday over Christmas in the Alps." And so I'll come out, but there's no way I'm skiing. I've just got my back straight. I'll just come out and sightsee and stuff. So I hitchhiked out there from the north of England, which was a fair old journey, and arrived on Christmas Eve in this alpine village. It was a beautiful starry night when I arrived, and snow everywhere. Anyway, after 2 weeks there, I was totally smitten, and I said to everyone in the bar, I'm going back. I'm going to pack all my things up, quit my job. I'll be back in a month. And they were used to tourists saying that. I don't quite believe me. And within a month, I was back and tentatively skiing, and it grew from there. Initially, I went out just for winters, but after doing that for a couple of times, bit by bit, I did the odd parts of summer, and then before I knew it, they'd met in the middle, and I realised that I was living there. And all the while I was taking photographs as an amateur, effectively, and I had a job washing dishes up on the mount in a 2,000-meter high restaurant on one of the best ski areas in the world, the Grand Montée in Argentière in the Chamonix Valley. And I was often given the role of clearing snow off the terrace up there, and I always had my Pentax around my neck while I was working away. And stop me if I'm rambling.
No. Keep going.
But while I was working there, the pisteurs were clearing the ski area to make it safe for skiers. And back in the day, it was a very macho activity. They used to hurl sticks of dynamite out of the helicopter or cut the slopes with using just a ski line to release these huge avalanches. And one day they kind of underestimated the amount of snow, and they blew this steep slope right up at the back of the mountain, and they triggered an absolutely monstrous avalanche which swept right down the Argentière glacier. And I saw this thing from the terrace, and I ran down to get a decent viewpoint and fired off some pictures with my Pentax, probably the cheap Tamron second-hand lens on it. And anyway, I managed to get the shot. And then along with other shots, I started doing slideshows in chalets and earning a bit of money to pay my way out there. And somebody saw this avalanche picture. It was an author who was writing a guidebook on the Chamonix-Zermatt ski mountaineering route. And he said, "John, I'd love to use this avalanche picture for my book. Do you mind, if I use it?" And I was, fantastic, yeah, published picture. I'd be really excited. So I gave him the transparency, which in those days was the original transparency, and took it off to England. And I was really fired up. I thought, I think I'm going to try and be a photographer. So I went back to London and got a job bricklaying to save up some money for more camera gear. And I kind of committed the whole of the summer to that. And then in the autumn, just before the ski season, I got a call from Peter Cliff, the author, and he said, "John, I've got some bad news. I'm afraid the publisher saw the picture and he doesn't want to run it. He thinks it'll terrify people who are thinking of doing the route." So we pulled the picture. But by that point, I'd kind of made that commitment, and I went out to Chamonix and did another season. And then the following year, my uncle knew he had a neighbour who happened to be the president of the British Institute of Professional Photographers, and my uncle said, "You've got to meet this guy, Don Fraser. He's a really good photographer." And this guy was in the heyday of architectural and industrial photography. He was traveling off to places in Saudi Arabia and earning staggering amounts of money in the process. And he agreed to meet me. So I went round to his home with my few prints that I'd got and mounted up nicely and everything to see what the great man thought of them. And he sort of looked at them and thought, "Yeah, they're quite nice, but son, you've got to get a better camera. The quality's terrible." So I was a little bit crestfallen by that, but I realized he was right. My little Pentax setup really wasn't delivering the goods. So it's probably more to do with the cheap, beaten up lenses I was buying from camera shops secondhand, And so I bought a Canon EOS 1, and from that point things kicked off, and I started on the path towards being properly professional. I mean, you can't condense the period, but it took me about seven years of not really earning anything. And I think I was lucky, because if you were in your 40s, I don't think you could necessarily give up 7 years of your life to not earning very much money at all. And it just happened that it was the right time in my life. I'd got the time. I was prepared to do dishwashing, bricklaying, whatever it took to buy camera gear and support myself for a season. And at one point I just took the plunge and said, "Okay, this year I'm not washing dishes. I'm just going to do photography, and let's see where it goes." And it was a long road.
I bet. So that first year, you decided to not work at all while you're away for the winter and just shoot photography. Did you have a plan for how you would earn money? Was it in the hopes of getting published, or were you doing shoots for the mountain, or what was the plan to earn some money with your camera in that season?
I think I was incredibly naive, so I didn't really have much of a plan.
Nice.
I just thought, if I take lots of good pictures, something will happen. And I think what I did was I wanted to get published in magazines, because we're talking, mid to late 80s, and magazines were still king as far as being published as a photographer
Yeah.
was concerned. Well, I felt so at the time, especially with skiing. Ski magazines like Powder Magazine were the objective. You know, you wanted to get your work published in that. And once you were published, if you got published enough, then manufacturers were more interested in supplying you with equipment. And initially,
do you mean camera equipment or ski equipment?
No, ski equipment.
Ski equipment,
No.
right? Yeah.
I had very little success getting free cameras.
Haven't we all?
Yeah, I've come close, but never quite managed it. So, I guess I relentlessly took pictures, and I did slideshows in the chalets, which I found, you know, they earned me. Back in the day, it was sort of like 200 francs a pop, sometimes more, which, given my rent was 1,000 francs a month, you know, was actually quite a reasonable amount of money towards my living costs. And if I did, you know, three a week or something, you know, it went a long way to supporting me. And I really targeted ski action photography and landscape, those two genres. And initially, my brother was the one who gave me the first pointers in ski photography. He was a very good skier and a monoskier, really passionate about it. And he loved the ski magazines. And I think he liked the idea of training his own photographer to get pictures.
Were you the younger brother?
I'm the older brother.
Oh, you're the older brother. Normally it's the other way around.
Yeah. And so, you know, I've still got the first picture I took, the first ski action picture, you know, and then we looked at the picture together, and he'd say, well, yeah, you need the skier, you know, in this position with the pole in the right place, and you need to catch this moment. And so he helped me a lot, and he was going to produce a holiday brochure for a chalet company he was setting up. So he used my photography through this catalogue, but the cover he gave to another photographer.
Oh, no.
Claire Renard, who was a very, very established and still is a well-respected Swedish ski photographer. And I thought, I didn't get the cover, you know. But I looked at the picture and I thought, actually, that's the kind of picture I want to take. I really like that picture. And Felix's work was extremely good. And in Chamonix, it was a world where the ski photographers were quite conspicuous. So, you know, we knew who they were and often came across them socially. And as I say, Felix Sinclair was a very established photographer. And he and a real local character called Gary Bingham as well, he was a filmmaker and photographer. And they came to some of my slideshows and gave me some really nice feedback. And you can't underestimate how valuable that is to someone starting out. You know, when you get a respected photographer giving you some encouragement, it really does make a big difference. And I've never forgot that gesture. In fact, Felix bought one of my prints from one of my exhibitions as well. So, yeah,
wow.
It was a great community. It still is a great community in Chamonix in that respect.
Wow. That's for him to, like, one thing to give some encouragement, but to purchase a print, you know, an established photographer purchasing a print from an emerging photographer, I think is a big gesture.
That's the ultimate compliment.
It was,
yeah,
incredible. That's really cool.
And you know, you mentioned earlier that you were out riding a motorbike from quite a young age. What got you into that as a sport or as a leisure activity?
I have a very early memory of back in the days before child seats and rear safety belts. I can remember sitting in the back of a Vauxhall Viva as my dad was driving through town, And I'd be kneeling on the back seat, looking out of the back window, watching motorbikes, and just, absolutely loving them. Like, I guess most kids like motorbikes. But I was lucky in that my dad had a motorbike in his youth. So unlike some parents of the 1970s, when the accidents were pretty regular on motorbikes, you had teenagers with no experience riding incredibly powerful bikes. And my dad said, yeah, you can have a motorbike, but you have to do an RACACU training course, which was run by police motorcyclists. So I thought that was a small price to pay. And I, as soon as I was old enough, I bought a motorbike, and I've loved them ever since. They've been part of my life the whole way, really. I've never not owned a motorbike since I was 16, really. And I lived in a very small rural village where I grew up, so the motorbike was very much that ticket to freedom, to getting out further than you could get in a day on a bicycle, which would have been the previous radius.
When you said you did you traveled the world for a year. That was in between school and heading away. Was that when was that?
That was, I did the first season in Chamonix, and then I'd always wanted to go on a hitchhiking, backpacking type trip, traveling further afield than the UK. So after that first season, I did some casual work with a tree surgeon friend of mine in Bournemouth and saved up some money. And that's the only season I missed in Chamonix. I went that autumn. I bought a one-way ticket to Delhi and returned about a year later, having traveled to various places, including Australia. So,
did you really?
Yeah, I visited. I hitchhiked across from. I actually got the train across to Nullarbor to Port Augusta, and then hitchhiked across to Melbourne, and then hitchhiked from Melbourne up to Darwin.
My gosh.
And New Zealand as well in between those two hitchhikes. Yeah, hitchhiking, just an amazing thing to do, and kind of sad the way it started out a little bit.
Yeah, that's that's one of those things that, like, by the time I was growing up, hitchhiking was just known as something that you shouldn't do. In terms of, our parents always just told, no, that's not safe. You can't do that. You never know who's going to pick you up. And then there was the various issues with hitchhikers getting killed in Australia and things like that. And there was just that fear of, like, oh, that could happen to me. But gosh, it would have been an experience. I
mean, there were horror stories even back then, but prior to leaving school one summer holiday, I think it was 1976, it was an amazing summer. My parents really allowed me an unbelievable level of freedom throughout my life. They were very supportive, but they let me go off hitchhiking during the school holidays with two mates. And we split into a group of 2 and 1, and we alternated. So sometimes the 2 of us had hitched together, and then all 3 of us would meet at a set destination at the end of the day. And I went off for about 6 weeks, hitchhiking around the UK, sleeping in hedgerows and graveyards and camping, and just living a complete sort of free life, down to some relatives in Dorset on the south coast where I stayed for a while. And looking back, I think I didn't phone my parents until I got to Dorset. So for probably over a week at least, maybe longer, I had no idea where I was or what I was doing. You know, I think sometimes that I realise there are risks, but I think sometimes kids would benefit from that level of autonomy and freedom these days.
Yeah.
I know the world's a dangerous place, but it's not as dangerous as people think. And hitchhiking isn't. I mean, my boys in the Chamonix Valley, there's the small village we lived in, which is Argentière, which is near the head of the valley. And Chamonix is about, I don't know, 7K down the road, a twisty sort of descent, and then down to the main town. And especially earlier on, the bus service wasn't great, the trains weren't great. And so everybody hitchhikes backwards and forwards between these two places. They still do. And women hitchhike alone, and young kids hitchhike. And my own kids, sometimes if they miss the school bus, they wouldn't tell me. They just hitch down and catch a lift down to school. So they grew up with a fair degree of freedom in Chamonix. Yeah. I guess there was always a risk, but I thought that freedom was good for them. So
yeah, it's a trade-off, isn't it? I mean, when you're considered completely reckless and foolish, but if it goes well, but it's a good point. I mean, I remember growing up in Australia here in Victoria in the burbs, and we'd disappear on our BMXs for like the whole day. You know, and then we'd have dinner at someone's place, and then, you know, you'd make your way home. It's just as long as you came home, you know. Yeah. And when younger, it was by the street, before the street lights came on, which is why summer was so much fun, because they didn't come on until like 9 o'clock at night. But yeah, it is a level of freedom that we don't necessarily afford this generation of kids. You know, I think because we're always so bombarded by everything bad that's happening in the world that we feel like the world is bad.
Yeah.
You know, and social media plays a huge part.
Those early trips as well, I think they did influence my interest and enjoyment of photography. Because when I look back at the pictures, you know, some of them are terrible exposures, and which, you know, it wasn't always easy. You couldn't see what results you were getting, and the cameras didn't have evaluative light readings. You know, they kind of, you pointed at someone in the shade and they'd come out as a silhouette, you know. So there were pictures that were exactly what you'd expect for an amateur at the time, but every now and again I can see in the original shots that I was taking then that I was beginning to understand composition and had an interest in that. You know, I'd take the time to move my position. I wouldn't just pick up the camera and point it, you know. I'd make an effort to compose the picture. So I think all these travels actually did help me when I came to try and become professional.
God, yeah, you must have seen some stuff. A full year of travel, like including to Australia, to India. Like, gosh, that would have been quite an eye-opening experience,
especially coming from a small country village,
small country town.
Yeah. I mean, 17 children in the school when my family arrived, so we swelled the numbers to almost 20.
Yeah, right.
Sorry.
I thought
I was going to ask you. No, I did, and then it's completely left my brain already. All right, let's move on. It happens. Senior moment. No, I do know what I was going to ask. You know, you said that you came to Australia as part of that travel period. What were your impressions when you traveled around Australia of this country and the people?
No, that's an interesting question. I was pretty skint, so I think people were good to me. A couple of people I'd met on my travels gave me somewhere to stay when I arrived in Perth. And when I got to Melbourne, I stayed with well, she was sort of a distant cousin, but she was an old lady, and I stayed in her little studio. What do you call them? unit
Oh
here.
yeah, yeah, like a flat unit.
Stayed in a little unit with her. And actually, another relative gave me a job at Broadmeadows College where I was. He just gave me some work, he kind of invented the work for me. It sort of sent me into these sort of abandoned rooms in the college and said, tidy the chairs up and, sweep the floor or whatever. But he didn't seem very interested in me actually doing anything. He was just doing me a big favor and giving me some money for my next leg in New Zealand. I enjoyed my first trip to Australia. It was unbelievably strange and different to me. I don't think I got the best out of Victoria, because most of my time in Victoria I spent in Melbourne. I think I visited Hanging Rock and a couple of other places, but I had no idea of what I'm discovering now from Healesville and from my travels up into the mountains. But what I did fall in love with was the Northern Territory. I was absolutely blown away by that place and by the kindness of people on my hitchhiking journey from Melbourne to Darwin. Because in England, you maybe hitch a lift and you get a lift for an hour and then you get another lift for half an hour. In Australia, I was getting lifts for 4 days.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And people would take pity on me because I didn't even have a tent. I just sort of set off thinking, well, Australia's got to be pretty warm. I know it might be a bit chilly at night, but I'll be all right.
Oh my gosh.
So, and then you come to Melbourne.
Yeah. Well, and I thought when I left Melbourne, everything will be fine. So I'm sort of hitchhiking through the Northern Territory, and the people I'm hitching a ride with, so what are you going to do tonight? And I had this sort of cotton quilted blanket thing I bought in India, which I was sleeping under. And I remember one guy in a VW camper said, I've got a tent in the camper, you can use that. Actually, he wrote me he was trying to convince me. I got a lift with him, I think it was from Port Augusta. And we arrived in Cooper Pedy, and which was just, to me, as an English person, that was the most bizarre place I'd ever been.
Yeah.
And
it's bizarre for us Australians too, don't worry.
Yeah, exactly.
He was traveling around Australia selling these hideous sort of copper, the copper engravings, they're sort of framed copper with black, almost like line illustrations of tigers and oriental buildings and stuff. And he was knocking on doors, paying his way by selling these things to people. And Cooper Pedy was actually quite rich pickings, because there were a lot of very bored people with plenty of money and nothing to spend it on. So he was quite well received. And he said, come on, John, you can give me a hand. And he sort of gave me half a dozen of these things and told me to knock on doors and sell them. And I never felt so awkward in my life. I had absolutely no talent for it. So I didn't get a full-time job with this guy. On the next day, we sort of moved on, and he dropped me off. So I wasn't subjected to that a second time. But that was the first time I went to an RSL, which at the time was in that town was kind of a bit like mayhem that night. So that was a real revelation for me.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a great trip. It was a really amazing trip. Yeah.
Any obviously it had a very positive sort of impact on you, and just still the way that you talk about hitchhiking now and stuff is very positive. Were there any like scary moments, any times during that trip where you were by yourself or you were hitchhiking with someone where you thought, oh, I don't know if I want to be in this situation right now. You know what I mean? Like just a little bit like, shit,
There
how
was
did I get
one.
here?
Yeah, there was one. The last lift before I got to, I think it was the outskirts of Adelaide somewhere, and I'd got a lift with this guy, and he just seemed a little bit strange, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And he asked me where I was going, and when I said Darwin, he said, "Do you fancy riding the train from Adelaide up to Alice Springs?" And I said, "No, I'm going to hitchhike." And he said, "Yeah, but I'm an engine driver. You could ride with me in the cab. I could swing that for you. But the train doesn't leave for 2 or 3 days." And I thought about this because I really like trains, and I thought this would be amazing. And he said, "Anyway, have a think about it. Come to my place and, have a cup of tea and a bite to eat. And you can think about it. If you don't want to do it, I'll run you back to the end of the road." So I agreed to this, and we drove down this dusty track to some bluestone or similar building in the middle of nowhere. And I started to get kind of creepy vibes about the whole thing. Whether I was right or not doesn't really matter, but you have to listen to your instincts. And in the end, I had my drink and a little bite with him, and I said, "No, I think actually I need to keep moving. I'm on a time schedule. Can you drop me back at the road?" Which he did. Yeah. But to answer your question, that was the one time where I just didn't quite feel things were right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's, you're spot on. It's like, it doesn't matter whether it was right or not, but you got to listen to those feelings, especially when you've put yourself in that situation so many other times and not had that vibe. I think when you do get it, you gotta listen to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Wow.
That's not exactly all. Just one slightly sketchy incident.
That's pretty impressive. That's a pretty good,
it's good odds.
Yeah. It's good odds.
It's a good reflection on humanity, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the very few.
A little bit more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I could recount. I mean, I could be here all morning and not talk about photography, just talk about the nice people that had helped me just on that trip alone. So we can't really, spend all our time doing that. But
John, do you still have the photos from that trip? Do you ever look back at them and sort of marvel at what was?
I do occasionally, but I've had a lot of travel since then. I've been really lucky in that my photography has given me some unbelievable opportunities for travel. Because I started to establish myself with magazines. By the time I left Chamonix, I was working on and off, sometimes only the ones, sometimes every year. But I'd worked with about 50 different magazines throughout the world.
Wow.
And some of my articles got translated into German, Japanese. I really went for that editorial magazine stuff.
Yeah.
And eventually, it was around about the time my first son was born, so in the late 90s, a lady who's the president of the Ski Club of Great Britain came to my apartment to speak to me. And the Ski Club of Great Britain, back in the day, was publishing a magazine called Ski and Board. And it was kind of looking a bit tired and lacking in really engaging photography. And it was all a bit happy hockey sticks kind of, definitely not of the moment of the free ride kind of feel, or the off-piste skiing that was beginning to really catch on with the advent of fatter skis and stuff. Anyway, she came to the apartment and she said, "Would you be interested in coming over to the ski club and discussing how to revive the magazine a bit, and working as a picture editor on the magazine. And back in that time, EasyJet had just started. So if EasyJet's a bit like your Jetstar,
Right.
and if that hadn't
terrible.
Yeah, but fulfills a function nonetheless. And at the time, you could buy tickets between Geneva and London for peanuts. And what's more, you could turn up about half an hour, 20 minutes before the flight and just walk straight on. Because pre 9/11, the security was a different ball altogether. So there was none of this come 2 hours before check-in. So in short, it made it really easy to travel between Chamonix and London. Geneva's only an hour from Chamonix, an hour's drive. And the flight is, excuse me, the flight's about an hour. So I ended up doing this between 4 and 6 times during the autumn, the pre-winter, pre-ski season, and was given the role of staff photographer and picture editor, which was an amazing opportunity. So I would go over to the office. It was my one and only ever office job. And I would go over and I would go through the transparencies that various photographers from around the world had sent in the hope they'd be published in the gallery, in the portfolio pages. And I'd find images to go with things the editor had written and so on. And I'd be involved in design meetings for the new masthead and the new layout. And so it was a really interesting learning experience and a really rewarding opportunity. And I did that. I don't remember how many years, certainly maybe 10 years or more, something like that.
Wow. Okay. So it's a big chunk of your career.
It was amazing because once I had a business card with picture editor, staff photographer, pretty much I could go to any ski resort in the world and they would comp me ski passes. And
nice.
It just gave me freedom to go anywhere. And occasionally the magazine would send me places. Sometimes I would set up trips. And for example, I had a really good relationship with the Canadian tourist board. And I was able to take a model with me. And by model, I mean sometimes in America, they call them athletes. Basically, someone who would ski for my photographs so that I could create action pictures with someone I could rely on that fit with a resort report. So I went to Canada, I think 3 years running, and I worked slowly from the Calgary end all the way across, visiting different resorts to Vancouver. So in these 3 years, I'd pick off about 3 resorts each time. And in that case, the Canadian Tourist Board paid for the flights and accommodation and the lift passes and everything. So basically, I just gave up my time and took my camera and the skier or skiers and or skier snowboarder combination. And I would do a lot of stock images. I dressed the skiers and boarders in clothes that I was working with, clothes companies I was working with. I'd give them hardware skis or snowboards, either that they were sponsored by or that I was working with, companies I was working with. So it was a kind of like a lot of my way of working. Everything was integrated. I'd got the tourist board, the magazine, the clothing, the hardware, all these things tied in. So when I pressed the shutter and took a picture, that picture could suit whichever purpose it was most useful to. So if I felt the picture wasn't that great for illustrating the article, then maybe it would go to the ski manufacturer. And I always kept that freedom with the work I produced. Like I'd never sold out the copyright, and I almost never gave exclusivity to the pictures I took.
Mm.
And what I did,
it's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, be very mindful though of conflicts. So, you know, I wouldn't send a picture to someone that would offend or put out of joint someone else that I was working with. So you had to think about what you were doing. But if it was a non-conflicting purpose, so if I shot something for a brand like, say, Low Alpine, I wouldn't supply it to a rival clothing brand, but Scarpa ski touring boots would be okay, and Low Alpine would actually like that, because then their clothing might appear in the Scarpa catalogue, and vice versa. And it's all of those interacting threads that allowed me to actually make a proper income from my photography. It was a tightly woven web of connected things.
But it's an interesting approach. You know, you basically, you know, working on the one location, taking shots, but your opportunity to, you know, sell that work to a multitude of clients is quite impressive, provided you can avoid conflict with that sort of stuff. I'm curious to know, you know, is there something from those years of working commercially for you know, whether it be a ski club or, you know, a resort or whatever it may be, a brand, what's the greatest learning that you got from that experience during that time that you're grateful for today?
A lot of things. I think working as a commercial photographer, where you have to deliver something to a client or a magazine, often your time is limited. You're not just wandering around, you know, pleasing yourself, doing your personal work. However much freedom you've got, there is always some kind of time constraint. And so I learned to be fast. Like, I learned to see the pictures quickly, to assess where the shot was, for example, in a resort, or if something spontaneous happened. I learned to be able to manipulate my equipment quickly, you know. And that commercial knowledge actually transfers really well to more artistic work, I think. Because my artistic, if you want to call it that, landscape, sometimes portraiture, but certainly landscape, I tend to be a reactive photographer. I don't tend to study an app to see when the sun's rising or what direction it's coming from. I tend to, there's nothing wrong with that, but I tend to go somewhere and react to what I see. And I enjoy that. I enjoy that side of it. And the commercial and the personal work, or the exhibition prints type work, it really overlaps. A lot of those skills overlap. It really helps if you can work quickly. And the other thing that I think commercial work has taught me is that the importance of ruthless editing.
I was going to ask you about your time as the editor, and whether that changed your photography, whether it helped you see your photography in a different way.
Yeah, it did help. It did help. And I think one of the maxims that I had from the outset was I never let work go to a client that wasn't the best of what I'd done. So any dross I kept to myself, even when I wasn't supposed to. I would just never, because I knew that what happens if you send a slightly blurred picture or a badly composed picture, they'll use it as a double-page spread on the front cover.
With your name, yep.
And that's your reputation by that, you know. So I've always been really ruthless about that. And I guess working with slide film meant that you had to really think at the end of the season. A lot of the work I do was speculative in terms of the early days with the ski photography. So I'd say at the end of the season, I might have 100 transparencies. And of course, you've only got one of these. There's no duplicates. There's no digital versions. There's just the slide. And very, very few magazines would take duplicates, I found. They rejected them out of hand, especially the good magazines. So basically, I had, say, these 100 pictures, and I maybe had half a dozen magazines or people that I wanted to send that work to. And I had to really think in the editing process, where do I send these? Because in those days, you'd have a slide envelope with your transparencies tucked in the various pockets, and you write the caption on the mount. And you'd fire them off to a magazine. You wouldn't see them again often for months. So if you sent them to the wrong place, then some of your best work would just be sitting under a desk somewhere and not see the light of day. So you had to develop a kind of a feel for what to send where. And one of the toughest magazines to know what was ideal was Powder magazine, which was the Bible for skiers worldwide, really, back in the day. And their photography was, a real showcase for, the pinnacle of ski photography. So the temptation was to send all your good stuff there in the hope that they would publish just one of them, and that would put your name on the map. And but of course, if you did that, then you sold yourself short with other magazines. It was a tricky time. I mean, it cost you a fortune to send stuff to America or Australia. I used to contribute to Australian skiing when that was. I don't know if it's still in print now, but I used to send my stuff all over the place. Well, you do sports, don't you, Justin?
Yeah. Never. I got into it. I got into photography sort of fairly late. Like started in digital when I was late 20s, and so it was a different world even then. There was a few magazines still kicking around. I got published in a few Australian wakeboard magazines. Wakeboarding being sort of a smaller sport. It was a bit easier to get published, but even then there was no money there. Yeah. And then I've shot snowboarding, but mainly for either just for myself while I've been on trips, or I did work for a snowboard tour company. So I would go on the tours with them, and I would shoot the tour and document it, and everyone on the tour, and then they would all come away with professional photos from their trip. Yeah. Which was a great experience for the people on the trip, but also they would share them on social media, and everyone would be like, wow, that's a great trip. I want to go on one of those. So it was sort of a marketing, and then the tour company would use them on their website and all that sort of stuff. So it was never, I never shot snowboarding for the intent of trying to get published. And I can't imagine how difficult that would be, because I don't know, it's a pretty competitive world. There's a lot of great photographers and lots of content getting produced, and not many places for it to get published.
It is. I mean, it's diminished the market. It's kind of interesting how these periods go in photography, because I guess I came into it in the really commercially at the end of the 80s, and I just missed the really, really lucrative world of stock photography. I just missed that. So people, the established ski photographers that were working at that time had been making an absolute packet out of Tony Stone and Gamma and I can't remember them all, these big stock agencies. And that was already beginning to tail off. And I joined Corbis probably in the early 90s. and I caught the tail end of it. I wasn't earning the big bucks that the previous photographers had earned, but I still would occasionally get a check come through the post that was surprising. But then I came in some ways at the peak of the magazine era. So, you know, their photography had almost no outlets for that. And yet my era did have that. I also had some great opportunities with outdoor brands that have since almost, you know, vanished, really, because of the way marketing's done now. So I think each photographer, you know, the era you're in, you have to find what works. So it was no good me pursuing stock photography. I kind of did it because I had the material. Yeah. And I then, you know, random sums would come in. Sometimes I'd look and it had been syndicated 3 times through different. What happened was, if you got paid in the UK where you were part of Corbis, you got your cut, which was, I don't know, 50% or something. If they syndicated it to Kenya, you got half of half. And if it had got syndicated further from there, you know, so occasionally I would get a check for $3 for a book cover. And
no.
and other times, you know, a £1,000 check would just come in out of the blue. So it was worth doing, but really that era had passed.
Yeah. Financially challenging, not knowing, you know, what's going to be left for you at the end of the month, you know, from your work.
You had no
idea. That that's changed.
You had to see it as a bonus, you know. You had to see it as something that, if it made you some money, but it still it took time to prepare the work. It was much easier in the days of film, because you just stuck your slides in envelopes, sent them off. You didn't have to touch a computer, do any of that stuff. Send the slides off. They'd probably you might send 60 slides in, they'd perhaps choose 5. They'd send the rest immediately back. They were much quicker than magazines. And then you could market them wherever else. Yeah. But the more you got into a stock library, the more it was a numbers game, the more you would make money from it.
Yeah.
And I mean, the guys that preceded my era, they were making some pretty big money from it, you know.
Yeah.
What about so the magazine world? You sort of mentioned, obviously that that landscape changed pretty drastically. Did you experience that change? Like, were you still working in the magazine world as the decline sort of started to happen and various publications slowed down or went fully digital or just stopped altogether?
I think I was lucky in that I left Chamonix, I think it was in 2016 or something. I continued to work with a number of magazines, but you're right, it was already diminishing. Yeah. But there are magazines that buck the trend. I still work with a magazine called Adventure Bike Rider in the UK. So I still write articles for them and supply pictures with those articles. And they have a sister magazine for adventure, general outdoor adventure. But yeah, it's definitely an era that's passed. I mean, there are magazines, and I think actually they're a bit like film. The use of film. I think magazines will still, and vinyl as well. I think magazines still have a role to play.
Yeah,
but
and there's a growing number of boutique publishers. You know, at least here in Australia, there's a few, and there's people that are self-funding their own magazines and just you know, getting content out there, which I think is wonderful. You know,
you have one.
Sorry, mate.
I was going to say, you have one in Australia, I think, called Better Photography, which is quite a glossy publication.
Yeah, one of our, I think Lisa, who's in the chat, or she was, I think she's written for Better Photography.
Yeah, I think it was that one.
Published there. Yeah.
Yeah, there's still a few.
Curious about that. Yeah, there is a few. I'm curious about the change or the transition, how it impacted you when you moved from film to digital. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, it was difficult. It was difficult, but ultimately it went quite smoothly. But it was a very difficult time because I'd cut my teeth professionally on slide film. And I really loved the I still do like the honesty and the authenticity of slides. You have to get within a third, half a stop with your exposures. Your composition is what it is. When you send a slide to somebody, you don't crop it, you don't zoom in on it, you just send what you saw through the lens. And I really like that. I like the fact that they're, if you look after them, they're pretty permanent records of what you've taken. So I really enjoyed that era, and it was hard to contemplate changing from it. So I used to shoot on 35mm for most of my professional work with Canon, and then for my exhibition work, I used the GW690 and the Fuji.
Sorry, who was that?
The medium format Fuji.
Yes.
I want one of those.
Yeah. Oh, they are awesome. That's one of the few film cameras that I have hung on to with a view to using it again. Yeah. It's a beast of a thing, and I've got a real soft spot for it. When you press the shutter, it makes the cheapest, tiniest ring sound, but the pictures are stunning from it.
Yeah,
the quality is stunning.
Do you know which version you have? I think there's 3 versions of that. I'm pretty sure.
The 2 professional. It's called the 2 professional or something. It's beautiful in its simplicity. You've got no light. You've only got shutter speed and aperture and ISO, and that's it. So there's something wonderful about it, and it's actually not that heavy considering the results that you get with it. So I would actually, when my knees were in better shape and my body wasn't so tired, I used to cart it along with my Canon stuff on various jobs, so that. But later, I got hold of an X-Pan, which for me was a camera that changed my love of photography a little bit. I absolutely adored that camera, and I wrote to Hasselblad in the UK when it came out, begging for a camera because they were so damn expensive, and the guy who was running Hasselblad in the UK said, dream on, buddy, but I will lend you one. I'll lend you one for a period of time.
Fair compromise. Yeah.
So the camera came out. It was battered and scratched, and bits of bronze, body showing through the lovely grey coating, and I think he sent me I think it's a 40mm lens or something with this, and I started carrying that with me to ridiculous places, to the tops of mountain peaks and all over the place, along with my Canon stuff, and just fell in love with this camera. And in exchange for the loan, Hasselblad had the right to use 5 of the pictures I took, and I took some action ski pictures with it, which they didn't have any of, and they used them in the magazine that they were producing back in the day. And then the second version came out, so I tackled this guy again, and he sent me the version 2 with the amazing 30mm wide angle with its sort of viewfinder that sits on the hot shoe, and I had all 3 lenses, and I took this thing in the mountains, and I actually ended up shooting a lot of really, really useful commercial pictures. One of them in particular got published so many times and was used as a massive sort of 4-meter wide print in the boardroom of Low Alpine. And of course, the quality was stunning. I'll never forget, I put the first transparency on the light box from the X-Pan. And bear in mind, I've been using professional camera gear at this point. And the difference just hit me straight away. The quality of that X-Pan image was just beautiful. So, yeah. Anyway, we digressed because I left all this passion for film and had to make the switch to digital. And I looked it up last night. The first job I took a digital camera on, like a lot of film guys, I guess, I took my film stuff and I thought, well, I'll take the digital with me, shoot a few, see what the client thinks of them. And it was 2004 when I actually took the plunge.
Do you remember what camera it was? What was the?
I think it was a 1DS, a Canon 1DS.
Okay.
So the second iteration, I think you had the EOS 1D and then the 1DS, I think.
Yeah.
It was a huge brick of a thing. My reluctance really for using digital at the time was I'd watched some of my fellow photographers in this same industry really struggling with getting the file the camera was taking, the raw file, to a state where they could send it to a client as a TIFF or a JPEG or whatever. And the whole workflow thing was just so awkward and cumbersome, I seem to remember. And time consuming. And I hung on because they jumped over in 2000 or 2002 or whatever. But the changes were so rapid at that time. I held on, and I remember I got a job, which was another real turning point in my career. But I got a job with Trek Bicycles in USA.
Oh, cool,
nice.
And I had that's another story actually, because that was one of those really fortunate breaks. But they after I'd done some product photography for them for probably about 3 or 4 years, they were starting a company called Trek Travel, which was luxury bicycle holidays. And I had a conference call interview with the very top man who owns Trek and their worldwide marketing manager and a couple of other people. And one of the questions was, if you get the job, will you shoot on digital or film? And I thought, oh, Christ, I haven't started shooting properly on digital and don't really know my way around it. So I said, I can shoot in digital, but would you mind if I shoot in film? And it was sort of left hanging there. And they got back to me a couple of days later and said, you've got the job, and shoot it in film if that's what you're comfortable with, and we'll scan them. And that was the last big job really that I started it in film. And after about a year, I'd switched to digital, and I shot the following 7 years or whatever in digital for them. But it was it was a difficult time, a lot of expense. And
I remember when we actually talked to Jason Lau for his interview, I'm pretty sure it was him that said that he jumped to digital early, but he then went back to film for a period and waited for digital to catch up.
No, interesting.
Because it just wasn't there when it first came out. I'm pretty sure it was Jason who said that. And you talked about that challenge that a lot of photographers, including yourself, faced about, moving on from something that you'd mastered for decades perhaps, and then all of a sudden it's like learning a whole new style of photography.
Yes.
You don't step through that process without losing some confidence or perhaps losing some mastery, because it's a whole new system.
Yeah, it was such a big shift as well in how you spent your time, and with it came some really serious advantages over film for someone like myself that might not have been the same for every photographer, but just the sending of images, because although initially you were sending them a DVD with the pictures on, posting, or using some clunky FTP setup, there wasn't the freedom to send them online. Most people actually wanted DVDs. Most of my clients when I first started, and because storage was so expensive, a lot of the stuff I just backed up onto DVD. I couldn't afford the 250 gig hard drives that were the state of the art. I didn't even know what a terabyte was then.
It was a different world.
But the hours you had to spend on the computer, when I shot in America doing a catalogue, it was hard work. It would take me all day to do the shoot. I'd get back to the hotel room, I'd put the films in a little bag, and then I could relax. There was nothing I could do in the evening. Boy, that changed with digital. Backing things up 3 times and all clearing, formatting memory cards and all that stuff. So you ended up often working till 11 o'clock at night, whereas previously you'd gone out for a beer.
Or an early night. Yeah.
Simpler times, although like the advantages are so huge, and you can trade them now. You can go back to film, but none of us do. I mean, we obviously everyone likes to shoot film, but for professional work, it's pretty tough. But that idea of everyone's in the same boat, and it's just a simpler time of just you just shoot film, and it is what it is, and it's no editing, there's no computers. It sounds so nice, but I mean, we often have in the live chat, we often have every now and then David Dare Parker pops in, and he's like, "Yep, film was great. I never want to see it again." Basically, it's this comment every time. It's like, sure, it looks cool and stuff, but those advantages, if you've worked with it a lot, there were so many disadvantages to the workflow as well.
Really, yeah, and I think one of the biggest things was being able to see what you were producing on the back of the camera. Especially when you're doing experimental stuff, like long exposures. You messed around, you bracketed and stuff. You didn't know whether things would work or not, and sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. But occasionally you'd miss a shot, and it would really hurt because it was something you couldn't repeat, and you'd got it wrong.
That's the thing that I don't understand how you did it is, I know from shooting snow stuff, it's knowing whether we need to try and get that again, like whether to make someone hike up again, do this all again, try and find another clean line or something like that, to know that did we nail focus or not? Did I get the moment or did I miss the moment? How many times with film you would, I don't know, do you just do another one just in case, or did you have a feeling that you got it?
I think it would depend, it would depend on why you were taking the shot, whether it was for a client or whether it was for personal work. But a lot of my early trademark kind of pictures were small skier in big landscape in a time when you couldn't touch out tracks. So I went to huge lengths to shoot huge landscapes on glaciers, and we would hike up on touring skis to get to little corners and tucked away glaciers where people wouldn't normally ski, just to do a photograph. And in those instances, you got one go, because once they'd done it once, the track was in there, and that was that. So that was an interesting element. But if I was shooting a catalogue where you were in tight on the skier, I tended to shoot it 3 times, because when a skier hit a pillar of snow and the snow exploded, has one of those little pieces of snow got in front of the logo or in front of the feature of the garment that the client
of course.
See? And I generally found that 3 goes ironed out mistakes by the skier or snowboarder. It ironed out technical things from me, and it ironed out the random things like, tiny little blob of snow in the wrong place or whatever.
Yeah.
And in film, I just did it 3 times and crossed my fingers. In digital, of course, if you needed a 4th, you could do it.
Yeah, because you knew you could see.
Yeah.
It's cool. That is, though, for anyone that hasn't ever shot snow sports, which is probably, now that I think about it, it's probably a fair few people. I mean, a lot of people might have taken a few photos up at, Mount Buller on the weekend of family and friends or whatever, but I guess not a lot of people have shot in powder snow. It's one of the most fun things to shoot, because every time is different. Like you say, they hit and it explodes, and it could. That's what's fun about it. It's like shooting things in water. Like, it's so dynamic, and every attempt could yield a different result. And that randomness is so fun.
I love the fact as well that you can be a landscape photographer and you're photographing a peaceful, tranquil scene of mountains, and then you're introducing dynamic action, explosive action into that. Or it might be very smooth, graceful turns, but you're adding a human element to a mountain landscape. And really, ski and snowboard photography they're a unique way of doing that, I think. And for the photographer, it adds an extra layer of interest, because there's timing in a way that there isn't with a landscape picture. A landscape picture, you are thinking about timing, but it's much more slow moving. Whereas skiing, you're talking about 500 thousandths of a second or whatever. And when I first started with the EOS 1, it had, I think, a 3 frames per second motor drive.
Yeah.
So I tended to have to wait until the skier was in the perfect position. Then I press and hold the shutter. So, by the time it took the 2nd and 3rd frame, the skier would quite possibly have moved out of focus, or would have moved into a less aesthetic ski position. So it was almost like 1 frame when I first started. When it moved to sort of 5 frames a second or whatever, things got a lot easier.
Yeah.
And then 10, and then now,
Yeah, we're pretty spoiled now. Yeah, pretty spoiled.
40. We're in Africa, and one of the guys on our tour was so funny. He had an R5 Mark II, which I think does 30 or 40. I don't know. It doesn't even matter. 30 or 40, it's the same thing. It sounds ridiculous when it goes off. I've got the same camera, and I've set mine down to, like, I think my max is 20, and then I have my main sort of motor drive set at 15, like for action. I find that to be plenty of frames, unless it's something I can never repeat again. 15's quite a lot of choice. And so he had this thing set up, and there was these odd times where, like, with nothing, like, so a bird sitting on a branch, an eagle sitting on a branch, not moving, and he just hear from the back of the vehicle we're in, like, just this blah, 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 like just this full speed, 30 frames a second for like 2 seconds. And we'd all just turn around and be like, what are you doing? And he's like, I don't know. It would have been 60 of exactly the same photo.
Yeah.
Good luck with the editing there.
And the storage.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
But he was having a great time.
Yeah.
So what was I going to ask you about? Oh, have you ever, I got this a lot. Now, I was working with, when I did my snowboard stuff, I got to work with a couple of professional athletes and then a few like semi-professional athletes, but not, that was kind of on the side of the main thing I was doing, which was mainly just shooting punters, just having a great time in the Japanese powder, and most of them could board, but they weren't pros or anything. I'm interested to know how many times did people that you were working with turn the wrong direction and absolutely just fill you and your gear in with powder? Did that ever happen?
Very, very rarely. The secret to snow sports photography, I think, is communication. And the second thing is working. It really helps if you work with people you know. And
I thought you were going to say people that know what they're doing.
That too. I've been hit by a snowboarder that was not a model of my choice, and I wasn't best pleased with that. Nearly knocked me senseless. And I've been also hit by a skier that I did trust, but who clipped a small twig that was sticking out of the snow, and it just sent him off slightly. I put my arm up to protect myself and sliced my arm in the process. So safety is actually a big deal when people are coming close. People would often ski extremely close to me if I'd worked with them for years. And so the spraying with snow thing didn't happen very often. Snowboarders are the worst for that because they set an absolutely massive amount of snow. Invariably, what I would just do at the very, very last second after getting the shot is I just spin round and turn my back and tuck the camera into my chest. And I just hear this wall of snow hit the back of my jacket. So you develop a self-preservation instinct. I think. Because I mean, it is a problem if your camera gets doused. You can recover, but it's not great for the camera.
It takes a while to dry it all out. And so the worst one, and I only ever did it once. I left my bag. I had a really good bag set up, and the flap sort of, I would have it open to be able to change lenses or whatever quickly. And this one time I just left the flap open. And of course that one time a guy just come down and just absolutely just hammered a turn right in front of me, and just it was like a mini avalanche just got me, and my entire bag was full of snow, and so I was like, never again. Every time, zip the bag up every time.
Well, I had a horrific experience with a camera bag once where I was working in a snow park, which was not my favorite environment anyway. I didn't really enjoy it, but it was part of the job sometimes. So I was in this snow park photographing a skier on doing some rails. And I'd left my camera bag near one of the other features in the snow park. There's no one much around, so I thought it's safe. And while I was working with the guy, in the background, I could hear a piece machine working its way around the slope. And I turned around to see this piece machine virtually on my camera bag, and it continued drove over the camera bag. So this awful crunching sound. I got a 200-2.8 lens in there, filters, all sorts of camera equipment. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was just standing there with my mouth open as these two semi-stoned park offices, drove off into the distance, leaving my flattened bag in the snow. I had a real battle with the resort owner who refused to take any responsibility, and the insurance company let me down. So it was a real tough experience.
And was it all trashed? Everything just destroyed?
No. A number of rolls of film were bust open and useless, and filters were cracked and stuff. And I think it destroyed one lens. Of course, I had the camera around my neck, thankfully. So
yeah, thankfully,
yeah. It was a bad moment.
Hard learned lesson, that's for sure.
Yeah, I love that you said a couple of half stoned. It's funny because it's accurate. True. I'm sure. Was your last film camera you were shooting? Because you were shooting on Canon. Did you have the 1V? Was that your last film camera? Yeah. The latest one? Yeah, that's on my list. That camera. I'm trying to find one secondhand.
Say you like props.
Absolutely.
This is the first EOS 1, and the thing I loved about this camera, I think this is one of the most ergonomic cameras ever made. These 3 buttons that you either press singly or together, the combination in that triangle is an absolute masterpiece. And I was able to use this camera wearing thick mountaineering mittens, and I could feel those buttons like Braille, even through the thickness of the mittens.
Yeah.
I could use this camera in conditions that a digital or a touch screen would be completely useless. And there was the other thing I loved about it was this great big lock button. You know, that you click that and nothing moved. And it was a wonderful camera, but a bit slow. And that 1V is a beautiful camera as well. Really lovely camera.
I've got 2 1Ns, but yeah, I'm just waiting for the right 1V to come along, and I'll probably sell those and
sold mine just before going to Australia.
Oh no!
The motor drive, 2 batteries, charger, the lot.
No, that would have been the dream. It's exactly what I want. I've got the Canon EF, the 50mm 1.2 and a 28mm 1.8 lens, and they're just sitting there just waiting for my dream film body to come along secondhand at some point.
It's interesting. I put away my film cameras when I went digital, and the price they were selling for, I don't know if I mentioned, but the 2 Hasselblad X-Pans I ended up buying from the guy in England.
Oh, nice.
He sold me at a really heavily discounted price after I tried them. And the price that film cameras were fetching when I made the switch was next to nothing. So they sat in the cupboard. Before I came to Australia, I thought, right, I've got to have a bit of a clear out. So I took a little Contax T2 compact camera, a Bronica ETR-SI, and my beloved X-Pans, and I took them to a classic camera shop in London. And I was absolutely stunned by how much money I got for them all.
Those X-Pans are worth a fortune. Absolutely.
Well, I bought the GFX 50S2 with the proceeds.
Wow.
And I had plenty of money left over from it. Yep. I mean, the 30mm lens went for £3,500. Just the lens.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And the bodies went. The really battered body went for about $2,500. And what really surprised me was that little Contax T2, the titanium one, came in a little suede box with a pink satin lining and everything, and I kept all that. And that fetched £1,200, for an ancient compact film camera.
Yeah,
it's crazy. Quite a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, and especially since, like you say, they dropped right down when the big switch to digital had happened, and everyone was like, "Well, these will never be useful again." Yeah. And then they had their resurgence.
Yeah, they continue to, which is amazing.
Yeah.
John, if we could shift, I'm just conscious of time. If we could shift our focus a little bit to the present day, perhaps. What are you shooting these days? And we'll lead into some conversation about gear. But what are you shooting now? What are you know, where are you spending your time?
I'm still plotting little trips, adventure trips in the outdoors, hiking, the ski trip I did in the Vogong High Plains the other week, a couple of weeks ago. And I've got some motorbike projects, some travel trips that I'm doing. I shot some pictures for a Donington Auctions. I shot some vintage motorbikes for them when I first arrived, but it's too much traveling really from Healesville, so I'm not doing that currently. So I'm picking up bits and pieces. I mean, I'm 67 years old, so I've already started drawing a French and an English pension, so I'm not under massive pressure.
Yeah.
To chase commercial work now, but I'm still extremely active. I still love photography as much as I ever did, and the latest project that I'm working on is a series of double exposure prints taken in the forests around the Yarra ranges, and I'm shooting man-made structures and then overlaying these structures being in the forest on the whole, and then overlaying complex second exposure of forest scenes, and the end result, which you've seen, Greg, the three that I sent to you, it gives the impression almost of these places in some future time when the forest is reclaiming the land from these structures. So it's about the intrusion of people into the forest, and it's about passage of time. And I thought it would be a fun project to use the feature on the GFX 50S, which has this double exposure filter, which, talking of advantages of digital, it means that you can actually see the composition. So although there's still a bit of surprise in how these things work out, these double exposures, which elements get lain over more strongly than others, can be a bit surprising to you when you take the picture. What you can do is control the composition in a way that you couldn't when you were doing it blind with a film camera. So I'm printing them as black and whites, and they look rather like pen and ink drawings, very, very, very detailed pen and ink drawings. I'm shooting them on a really wide aperture, so you get every twig, every leaf, every detail. So they become really complex images. So that's one of the things I'm working on, and I'll be showing some of those at the Open Studio in the Yarra Valley on the 10th and 11th of October and the 24th and 25th of October.
Nice.
So I got a house here in Healesville that had been owned by artists before we moved in, and they built a kind of gallery space in the room behind where I am here, put track lighting in, just the most beautiful space to exhibit photography. And it didn't really dawn on me until after we'd moved in just how good a space it would be for putting my photography in. So I'm going to use that for the Open Studios.
Nice. I wonder if a friend of our show, Greg Carrick, who's also been a guest and watches every episode, he's from up your way. He's always sticking his nose on into anything that's to do with photography, so I'm sure he'll show up at some stage. And he's a fellow GFX shooter as well. So
he's got a 50.
He's got a 50. Yeah.
You guys have time. You're welcome to come up too.
Thanks, man.
Well, it would be nice to visit. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Greg Carrick's actually a good person to talk to in terms of GFXs. He experiments with tons of weird lenses on them. He's made his own got his own lens mounts 3D printed and put weird projector lenses and all sorts of weird stuff on there. So
that sounds very interesting. Yeah,
it's very clever.
Yeah, he has a lot of fun with that.
So we've talked about the GFX. What other gear are you using on the regular?
I still use my Canon. I shot some pictures for the local choir here, and I find the Canon is still what is the equipment that is most instinctive for me, most ergonomic for my big hands. I find all the fiddly buttons of for example, the Fuji XE3 a little bit tricky if you're under pressure. But when I'm on my motorbike trips and outdoor trips, I'm tending to use more and more the Fuji XE3 and the X Pro 2.
Nice.
Various prime lenses with those. But I would have given my right arm for the little Fujis when I was working in the mountains, because I used to carry ridiculous amounts of weight up and down mountains, and when I was doing things like every year, for some of my clients, I had to do a small number of ice climbing photographs, and it's a really spectacular subject. But part of me always used to be, a little bit anxious about it the night before. It's probably one of the more dangerous of the mountain sports. So the ice is unpredictable. Your protection is not always totally bomb-proof, and I used to be quite intimidated by it. But at the same time, as a photographer, aesthetically, it was a fantastic subject matter. So I just used to take a deep breath and go and do it. And coming back out from the climbs, because I often would go in at the top, prosecuting back up a rope with heavy EOS 35mm cameras and stuff was extremely hard work and tiring to use. Things like little Fuji would have been wonderful for that sort of circumstance.
I can't even imagine having to ascend a rope with that sort of gear. It would not be fun, especially
and you're all bulky because you're wearing a lot of protective gear yourself.
And you'd often be very cold, very wet. And
then I was going to say, and then you get sweaty trying to climb up a rope, and then you get cold again. Be wonderful.
But as I say, as a subject matter, it's exceptionally photogenic. So
it'd be amazing.
Indeed.
At the top of the show, you said that you've managed to use, or I can't remember the exact words you used, but photography has been a part of almost every aspect of your life for decades.
Yeah.
Can you, I know it's pretty tricky because the world has changed so much now, but do you have any advice for people that want to do that now with their life, make photography a part of it, part of their personal life, their travels, their business life for the coming decades?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, the reflecting on the way I did it, I worked primarily, my subject matters, the sports people, were often close friends, and if they weren't, they became friends. And so I had a pool in Chamonix of people I could work with. Some of them were at absolutely the top of their game. So something like ice climbing, I wouldn't just go with anybody, because it was something where my safety was super vital. And so I would go with a specialist, someone who really knew ice climbing, was so comfortable with ice climbing that they could strike a pose or pause in a really difficult point of the climb for me. So you build up that trust with people. I worked with the same skier for 25 years.
Wow.
We went out every winter for 25 years and we traveled all over the place together. He was a Scottish guy called John Bikers, and I learned a lot of mountain craft from him. And he was an interesting character because he really cared about the finished image. He wasn't motivated by money, although I paid him. He was primarily motivated by creating beautiful pictures of skiing. And when you work with people like that, you become a team of two people. And that's how you can really chase a kind of excellence in what you do, is by having that support. And that extended to friends who supported me before I could pay them, and who would be very patient and climb up and down and do ski pictures for nothing, maybe a free jacket or something like that. And then also my family. My wife has featured in my commercial work over and over and over again, and in fact at a point where she started complaining that I was only photographing her from the back. And the reason I was doing that was because my clients were starting to think, we can't keep seeing this same person, so I make her anonymous with ski goggles and a buff, or take pictures of backpacks with her and stuff. And my kids the same. When my kids were very young, I decided it was time to hook up with somebody for ski clothing for them, starting with when they could just about walk, and then ultimately ski hardware, until by the time they were about 14 or 15, they could do very convincing action pictures that would have been okay for a magazine. But all through, we would work as a family, and we would go on trips together and write a resort report from a family perspective.
Oh, and that's a great idea.
Well, yeah, and the kids would understand that, that sort of burger and chips lunch on the mountain, or that ski pass, or that nice hot tub they were going to go home to, had to be paid for by a little bit of cooperation with pictures. So they were really good about helping me create the pictures I needed to make the whole thing work. And I think it's hard to, because we were saying before, about stock photography being something that I just missed. And then I enjoyed the magazine and the product photography of outdoor clothing era, which incidentally has now almost dried up because most of the content is shot by climbers and skiers themselves on their phones, their head cams, and it's just for the internet. So they don't need to be high resolution files. So it's actually eliminated a lot of the things that I made a living from. So to suggest how a young person could integrate photography with their life, which was your question, I think they'd have to find their own path, because they'd know more about the market that they might be able to sell to. But I think the thing I would say is, follow your heart, photograph what you really love, be really particular about your photographs, really, really struggle for as close to excellence as you can, and be prepared to sacrifice a lot of time and not be very wealthy. And I think ultimately, it is possible, but there's a lot more people want to be photographers than become photographers, because it is really hard, and you need a good dose of luck as well.
Yeah,
you need a bit of luck just here and there at the right moment. I mean, one piece of luck that happened for me, I used to go around trade shows in Munich. They used to have one of the biggest outdoor trade shows in the world there. It was absolutely enormous. 17 massive halls full of people trying to sell their products to buyers, not to the public. It was trade only. And I would go there with not with an iPad, but with a heavy black portfolio with my published work in sleeves. And I would trudge around these halls to try and drum up business. And you were the least welcome person on those trade stands. As soon as they saw you were a photographer, it's, the marketing manager's not on the stand at the moment, or he's too busy with a client, he can't see you. And I would trudge around, and I'd spend 5-6 days at these shows. They lasted for nearly a week. And if I got one client out of it, then it was successful. So it was an investment in a hotel or a hostel, and a lot of time and a lot of effort. But ultimately, by the time I'd established myself, I'd go around and I'd be on friendly terms with the people I was then talking to. So the marketing manager would then perhaps stop the boring stuff he was doing and sit down and look at some pictures and chat to me about the mountains. And ultimately, after working with some of my clients for over 2 decades, some of them I worked every year for 25 years, they became friends. And actually, I suppose what is quite interesting, I don't know if you could do this now, and I didn't know anybody who'd done it before me, but because I was working regularly with the same clients, for example, I worked with Low Alpine when they were still producing clothing and backpacks, an English company called Mountain Equipment, Scarpa, ski mountaineering boots, and some ski brands. And I'd work every year with these people, and there would be at least 2 shoots a year, the winter collection and the summer collection, or spring and fall. And after a while, I thought they would hire me for a certain number of days, to get the jobs done. And I realized that this was becoming so regular that I proposed to 4 of my clients, why don't we set up a rolling contract? You retain me, you commit to a certain number of days, I give you my day rate, we agree a fee for editing time, so I would get half a day rate for the time I spent editing and stuff. And so I had the ski and board picture editor and staff photographer role, which was a regular thing in the autumn. And then I had these 4 rolling contracts where I knew exactly how much work I was getting, and I was paid quarterly for them. So I basically ended up almost with a known income for a number of years. And that arrangement meant that they secured my time, and I had a certain amount of security. And the way they would work, the advantage for me was that I was based where they wanted their pictures shot. They wanted them shot in the mountains. They wanted authentic pictures in perfect weather for the job. So if they wanted something shot in a blizzard, I could go up and shoot it in a blizzard. If they wanted blue sky and sunshine, I could do that. Yeah. So they would send their products to me, and the ground floor of our house would be absolutely rammed with cardboard boxes to the ceiling, literally. And then all these products would arrive, scores of jackets and gloves and clothing and stuff. And then I would take this gear out, I would arrange with models, and I'd take it out only when the conditions were right. And previously what they'd done was they'd all have a big jolly from the company and say, right, we're off to Chamonix, we'll do the photo shoot, you've been a good boy this year, you can come. And they'd come out, and then the lifts would all be closed because it'd be raining and too windy, and they'd get absolutely nothing. So by working the way they did with me, it allowed them to get prime conditions.
Yeah, that's a great way to leverage something that it advantages you, but it's a big advantage for them as well, and to leverage that into saying that, okay, the way that you can work with me like this is through this contract. You can't, if you want to just pay my day rate ad hoc, you can't also just expect me to drop everything and work when the conditions are right. Like you need to commit to me, and then I will make sure that I plan to shoot your stuff in the best. It makes so much sense, and it's looking out for their best interest and yours at the same time.
Yeah, and it gave, that rare thing for a freelance. It gave me a degree of security because I had a young family and I had a mortgage to pay. And the big challenge for me was I'd got the winter working nicely, but I had to fill the summer, and that's where mountaineering photography started coming in. And also I spoke about a dose of good luck. At one of these trade shows, I went to see Trek bicycles, and I'd been trudging around this trade show for all day. No takers, went to all the big brands. Nobody was interested, or there was just some young person that didn't call the shots that would speak to me. And the very last one of the day was Trek. And I, by chance, got a meeting with this woman who said she'd be delighted to look at my portfolio. So we sort of went over to a quiet part of the hall, and I laid out my pictures. I didn't have any bicycle pictures. I had pictures of small skiers in big landscapes and that sort of thing. And I said, well, this is my work, and this is what I do with skiing, and I'd love to do it with your bicycles. I'd love to photograph your bicycles in dramatic landscapes where the landscape's as important as the bicycle. And she liked what she saw, and started off by sending me some bicycles in exchange for doing some sample images, and then started hiring me. And then this Trek Travel thing that I mentioned earlier they were starting this luxury bicycle touring business. And Trek are a big company, and it was at the peak. I just happened to make contact with them when Lance Armstrong was doing his thing. Their budgets went through the roof. They were doubling their bicycle sales every year in America. Every time he went to Tour de France, their sales doubled. So exponentially, they were growing hugely. And so I had the interview for the job, and the first year they had no business. They had an idea, and they commissioned me to go out with 2 models and 2 of their bicycles and go to the various countries where they were going to be running the tours, and imagine the experience the cyclists would have, eating picnics in Tuscany, cycling along the Loire Valley, whatever it was. And I would take 2 different models each time and go and visualize this experience they were then going to sell with a catalog the following year to real clients. And so I did that for the first year, traveled all over the place for them with that. And then they established the company, and it really took off. So for subsequently, each year they were sending me to new countries, but this time I'd go with the group, a bit like your Japan trip, Justin, where they'd send me with the group. It was hard work. I'd have to be there at dawn with people setting up the bicycles for the clients, and I'd still be there at 11 o'clock at night photographing them, sipping a nice glass of Bordeaux by the Loire. Finally I'd go to bed absolutely naked. But the wonderful thing was I got a lot of traveling, and I could shoot work that I could use myself as well.
Yeah.
Sounds
So
so
that,
cool.
that was a fantastically fortunate break. I mean, I kind of initiated it, but I had no idea the travel thing would start. And it filled out my summers. So I really was then busy all year round. So that was a turning point.
It sounds like it is fortunate, and there is an element of luck in everything, like you said. But like you also said, you put in a lot of work trying to open these doors, trying to meet with people, and I think that's one of the things that everyone should take away. I know it's something I definitely believe is that it's not that you can make your own luck, but you can certainly give yourself the best chance at luck striking by putting yourself in those situations, you know. And there is always an element of luck, but you get luckier the harder you work. I do believe that. That saying.
I mean, the breakthrough I had in France was with a magazine called Vertical, which was probably worldwide one of the most respected climbing magazines. And this was really early on when I was still finding my feet. And I'd sent them a couple of phone calls, you know, and tried to make contact with the editor, and nothing much was happening. So I packed a big heavy green suitcase that I've still got to this day that I used to take my slideshow equipment in. I filled it with mounted prints of ski pictures. And I walked into the offices of Vertical magazine with this big suitcase and said, "Can I see the editor?" and I managed to get a meeting with him, and I sort of plonked this suitcase down on his desk, opened it up, and he started looking at the pictures, and he said, "We want to run these." And they ran an 8-page article with the ski pictures that I'd shown him. And it had a huge effect for me locally in Chamonix to be published in this Vertical magazine. So as you say, you know, that was, you know, I initiated it. I couldn't have predicted his reaction, but you're right. That piece of advice that you've just outlined applies whatever era you're in. You know, it doesn't matter whether it's film, digital, magazines, you know, whatever. There has to be ways that young photographers can make a living and make photography part of their lives. It's just figuring out the puzzle, and then and maybe just keep taking pictures and you know, hoping that something will come to you, that you'll find what direction you want to go in.
I think that's wonderful advice. And it's true. You know, you've just got to keep showing up. I think that's the way I kind of look at it. I find that luck, like hope, is a fool's game. You know, you've got to make things happen to a certain degree. And then happenstance takes care of the rest, you know. Very conscious of time. We're over the 2-hour now. 2-hour mark. I told you it would go quick, John.
Flies past.
Just an hour left then.
Well, I'm going to go. You can stay. That's fine. Couple of final questions. One question I have for you, and I gave you a heads up before we went live. You know, if you were to recommend someone to fill the seat you're in right now and have a chat to us about their craft and their journey and their art, who would you recommend?
So you made the mistake of telling me about this just before. I'm not sure I could answer that without giving it some real thought, because what I'd like to suggest is someone young, perhaps, rather than somebody who's my age. But I think it's something I would have to get back to you on, Greg. I really
that's good.
Would need to think about it, because I wouldn't want to give a flippant answer.
Yeah. No, I respect that. I think that's really good.
I've got an adjacent question then. Are you a photo book purchaser? You know, do you have any photo books of photographers that you admire that you've got on your bookshelf still now?
I do, and I've got photographers who I really admire who have been influential that I couldn't afford to buy the books of.
Yeah, me too. Some of them are expensive.
I've got one by Lartigue, Jacques Lartigue. I admire him for two things. First, his pioneering in trying to capture motion in the form of skaters and racing cars. Those lovely old pictures where the wheels become like ovals because of the way he's shooting them on a slow speed, but also he had a real joie de vivre. Like Lartigue took pictures for fun because he really loved taking pictures, and in the end left a legacy. Cartier-Bresson, he's almost a cliche to say he was an inspiration, but I'd never heard of him. A girlfriend of mine, when I was in the early years in Chamonix, said, "Oh, there's an exhibition of Cartier-Bresson in Switzerland." Who's Cartier-Bresson? You know, I hadn't heard of him, didn't know anything about photographers really at that point. And I thought, okay, so we actually cycled there. It took us 2 hours. We went over 2 cols into Switzerland, 2 mountain passes on our bikes. And we went to the exhibition in Martigny, and it was a big exhibition of his work. And I remember looking at it and just being blown away. And although he's famous for the decisive moment, I think the biggest influence he had on me was composition. I thought he just had the most exquisite eye for composition, even though his pictures were often about movement and timing. Another one that was really influential was a Japanese photographer called Fukase. I think that's how you pronounce it. He did a series called The Raven, and I saw it in the Canon gallery of the V&A in London. And it's a series of pictures he took when he was really depressed of ravens. And they're really kind of abstract, poetic images. And I remember I spent an eternity in the gallery staring at these pictures, thinking about them. They seemed so random, but as a whole, as a work, they seemed to convey a really poetic message somehow. And it kind of made me really think about that side of photography, something that wasn't literal, that was really, really just struck to you with the feeling behind it. It was an amazing piece of work. So yeah,
that's cool.
there's others, but we're running out of time, aren't we? So
Very cool. No.
Yeah. No,
there's some. I've written down a few of those names. I was just pulling up some of Jacques Latigue's work. It's crazy. Very cool.
Yeah. Early days of photography.
Yeah.
Yep.
One final question, I guess. We normally ask all of our guests, especially people that have had a lot of cameras over the years, if it was the end of the world, you know, some sort of zombie apocalypse or something, or you're stuck on a desert island, and you could only grab one camera and one lens to document that, what would you grab?
Oh, dear me. Am I trying to... It's the end of the world. I think it would have to probably be the GFX, I think, if I could find somewhere to charge it. Because I think if the end of the world was on its way, I wouldn't be too, feel too stressed about how much time I had. So I think I could take the time to compose a few nice pictures with that camera.
Now you can pick any camera you want, even if it's one you don't own. So would you switch that out for the GFX 100 RF? That nice lightweight version.
Let's keep life simple. One lens, one camera. Yeah, that would be the one actually.
Yeah, nice.
That's quite how I download the pictures. I'm not sure. Are we assuming there's still power?
A solar panel or something.
Yeah,
download them straight to your phone. You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
It's not what's important.
You've got to become resourceful anyway, so you'll work through it.
It's funny. Everyone has different answers to that question because quite a lot of our guests, they go more in the direction of like, what would be best for self-defense? And they're like, well, I'd take my 600 mil 5.6 and just bash people with it if I get in trouble or something. So it just depends. Everyone's got a different answer.
I think I would choose that one because I like taking panoramics, and I think if I would amuse myself by pursuing the whatever it is 24 by 68 format or whatever.
Yeah, I've been cropping a ton of stuff in Lightroom to that format. It suits so well. Some of the stuff that I did in Africa on the streets, I cropped to that. And I wish my Canon had that natively as a crop mode because I'd love to compose with it, not just have to imagine what it will look like later. And that's what's great about the GFXs. Yeah,
it really is. It really helps if you can see what you're doing through the lens.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah,
makes a difference.
I agree.
I think that might be a nice, neat place to tie a bow in today's episode of the Camera Life podcast. John, just on behalf of Justin and I, and obviously everyone that's been watching and listening and will yet to watch and listen, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your amazing story. It's hearing you detail each of the steps in your journey, where every step seems to be a challenge, but you faced it and you overcame it and you created a profession and an art practice out of it. And I think that's worth celebrating. So thank you so much once again for being here with us today.
Thank you both. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah. And thanks so much for the stories about hitchhiking. I love that. That was great.
Yeah.
Could have done a whole show just on that.
We did go off track a little bit there, but
no, that was awesome.
Good.
I'd love to see
part of your journey
one day.
Literally. Yeah. Hey, Justin, have you ever hitchhiked?
Not properly. I don't think. Not like I've been given a lift or whatever, but never heading. Like this is my intention is to travel somewhere in this way.
Yeah.
I think I've been offered a lift before, but it was because I can't even remember. Like we were stuck somewhere or something like that. It's never been like I'm going to get from here to here, and I'm going to just hope people will help me. Never. So maybe I'll have to try.
Me either. I did get a lift at the first BFOP we went to. I was picked up by someone on the side of the road because obviously it looked like I was lost and trying to find a workshop. But that was a fellow BFOPper, so it was fairly safe.
We almost made a full episode without saying BFOP, Greg. Damn,
I just ruined it, didn't I? No, sorry. I'm sorry, everyone.
It's sorry, John. That's the Bright Festival of Photography. That's what BFOP stands for. So it's
right.
It's in October
come up a lot. Year. It's come up a lot on the podcast lately.
I became slowly aware of that as a newcomer to the area, and it looks like something that would be worth visiting.
If you get a chance, it's very hard to get a ticket. They sell out really quickly, like within a few days of the event. They release the new dates, and then they sell out pretty much straight away. So next year's will sell out a couple of days after this year's event. And but if you can get a chance to get a ticket and get up there, it's reasonably priced. I think it's in the $300 or $400 range for a 3-day festival. So it's not super expensive, but it's not as cheap as the Fujifilm one. And if you get a chance, you'll meet so many people. Like it's 600 people all there for photography. And I think this year there's 42 or 3 or 4 instructors or something like that that are from all different genres and things and different backgrounds. It's pretty fun. Very fun.
Nice.
Hard not to get excited.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I think we'll roll the music and we'll say goodbye to some people. But John, thank you once again. And
thanks, John.
We look forward to seeing what you do next.
All right,
Yeah,
cool.
and maybe October. What did you say it was? 20 something. The OP Studio.
The weekend of the 10th and 11th, and the 24th and 25th. So
Okay,
2 weekends. Of October.
24th and 25th.
And anyone welcome that happens to be watching this that wants to come along and talk about photography and the pictures, it's a really nice environment, and obviously Healesville's a cool place to go and grab a cup of coffee or whatever.
Yeah.
While you're at this one.
All right.
Very
I feel
cool.
a road trip coming on.
Could
there
be.
you go.
All right, let's do this. Felicity Johnson says, thanks, John. Interesting life. I agree. Very interesting. Lucinda says, great chat, team. Loved listening along while working. See you Monday. Yeah, see you Monday. Hope you got some work done this morning. I think Julie Powell's voting that if you were going to fight zombies off, you need a tripod because they got more reach. That's a good idea.
That is a good call.
And Julie Powell's never been to the snow, let alone shot it. Well, you should make the trip one day, Julie. It's fun. Very fun. And let's read this one out. So sometime through the show today, East Coast Photography said, can I have an online gripe? Nothing to do with today's interview, but I turned up to my first shoot today, a builder's house, not ready, windows filthy, zero landscaping, and the guy says you can Photoshop it. That would have been frustrating. Tony says, thanks for gracing with your presence, Castles. Yeah, I'm back. I'm back from Africa, and I'm here. So
I feel the same, Tony. Don't worry.
All right. Thanks, John. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, everyone in the chat. Everyone that was here, Stuart Lyle, Lisa Leach, DigiFrog, you're all legends. We'll catch you guys on the next one.
See you, team. Bye.